Substantial. Good.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us today for what promises to be an interesting discussion on our area's rapid growth and the infrastructure that supports that growth. My name is Ashley Hurst. I'm the Executive Director of the Stubblefield Institute for Civil Political Communications at Shepherd University. We are thrilled to be here today for what we hope will be the first in a series of discussions on community growth. The mission of the Stubblefield Institute is to study and promote intelligent, civil, and authentic political discourse, and how that can play an essential role in our nation's ability to better meet challenges and solve problems. Tonight's panel discussion is just one of the ways that we carry out this mission as we seek to bring people together who share a passion for an issue, though they may not share the same opinions regarding that issue. Just as we know that each of you hold varying opinions related to the growth in our community. Our goal tonight is to educate, provide a forum for questions, and to model civil discourse, even on controversial topics where our opinions might differ. We don't mind passionate discussions or the sharing of differing viewpoints, but we do request that our panelists speak respectfully to one another and be critical of ideas rather than each other. Throughout the program, you will have the opportunity to ask your own questions, and Hans Fogle, our moderator this evening, will be giving more instructions on that as before we begin. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Hans and our panelists for sharing their time and expertise with us. Hans will introduce our panelists in more detail in just a few minutes. I'd also like to thank the members of our Community Engagement Committee, Ross Curtis, Bev Hughes, Daniel Bennett, Ed Wilson, and Effie Kallas. They are the driving force behind today's program and selecting future programs, and I appreciate the time, thought, and effort they put into bringing tonight's panel discussion to you. If you'd like to share your thoughts on future programs, there are a couple of ways to do that. You can take our community growth survey, which can be found on our Facebook page, or you can fill out the post-event survey, which you can do either online through scanning the QR code, or did we bring hard copies of that? Okay, you'll need to do that online through scanning the QR code on your program. Tonight, I hope that you not only enjoy the discussion, but you also learn something and consider other points of view when forming opinions about community issues related to growth. Finally, I'd like to thank Musselman High School for providing this space and technology support for tonight. And I'll introduce our moderator, Hans Fogle. I've had the privilege of working with Hans in a variety of capacities over the years, starting when we were students at Shepherd University. However, when we started there, it was Shepherd College. And when we ended, I believe both of us, it was Shepherd University. After graduating from Shepherd, Hans began a career in broadcasting, and in 2018 became the news director for WEPM Radio, and then the host of a local interest show, Panhandle Live. Over the years, Hans has been a very active member of the community, supporting many different organizations. He spent the last 3 years as the Public Information Officer of Jefferson County Schools and lives in Jefferson County with his wife and children. Without further ado, I'll turn the program over to Hans, who will introduce our panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, your moderator for this evening, Hans Fogle.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to the Stubblefield Institute, Shepherd University, and Ashley for the kind introduction. I think I sent you 2018 and I put a 1, should have been a 0. Makes me seem younger than I am, but it's really wonderful to be here with anyone who's watching at home and all of you here in person. It's great to have these opportunities to come and talk and share ideas as a group and as a community again. And I'm thrilled to be a part of that in whatever capacity I can be. So introducing this evening our very generous panel who are sharing their time and their expertise, as Ashley said. Starting to my left, Lynch Christian. He is the Vice President of the Eastern Panhandle Home Builders Association. Eddie Gochenour, who is a member of the Berkeley County Council. Jim Ouellet, the Executive Director of the Berkeley County Public Service Water District. And Clarence Settle, who is an advocate for smart growth here in Berkeley County. So a round of applause for our panelists. And the laying of some ground rules and establishing some norms this evening. Berkeley County, West Virginia, about 321.6 square miles, with about 126,000 people calling it home, according to the latest census data. And despite a downward trend in population across our state, Berkeley County is one of the parts of West Virginia to see sustained population growth. The signs of that growth are evident. More homes are being built. Infrastructure is expanding. There are more cars on the road and more businesses opening all the time. And over the years, different ideas have been proposed about how to, the impact of that growth on the community and how we could potentially handle further growth. The Stubblefield Institute for Civil Political Communications has gathered this panel to begin a discussion about different perspectives that should be considered. There are many other areas of life that are impacted by growth, everything from emergency services and schools to the environment. But tonight, we have a broader focus. As we begin, let's establish some common understanding and a very simplified look at the current land use management or planning that's in place. In order to have a discussion on land use management and planning, we must have a common definition. For tonight's conversation, land use planning will refer to a standard of how land will be used that will promote more desirable social and environmental outcomes and a more efficient use of our resources. Number two, more people and buildings require more infrastructure. While the term refers to many different things, tonight, when we talk about infrastructure, it will be a broad term used to speak about all necessary upgrades. We don't have the right information or all of the interested parties available to dive into specifics this evening. Number three, Berkeley County does not currently have a county-wide zoning ordinance, although there are a few areas where zoning is in place. Cities often have zoning, and there are HOAs in some communities. The Berkeley County Planning Department, under the authority of the Berkeley County Council, also works to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Berkeley County residents by providing direction and oversight for orderly, sound, and cost-effective land development through the administering of the subdivision regulations, according to their website. Number four, tonight's discussion focuses on residential development. Commercial development will be part of a conversation down the road. And lastly, this is not a debate where panelists are seeking to win. This is a civil discussion about what individuals and the groups they represent see as the challenges, solutions, and the costs of continued growth. So tonight will be a conversation. Each panelist will get 2 or 3 minutes to introduce themselves, the group they represent, and what their interest in land use management is. We'll begin with some predetermined questions after that to get the conversation started. When answering, each panelist will keep their answer to about 2 minutes. If another panelist has a follow-up response or question that arises during another's answer, gesture, I'll make a note of it, and give you room to do so after that panelist is finished speaking. The audience can also submit written questions, both here and at home. If you have a question, please fill out one of the forms on the table, lift it up, and a member of our Community Engagement Committee will be around to get it. We'll try to address as many questions as we can, but can't guarantee that we'll get to all of them. We'll also be taking questions from those joining us virtually. Anyone watching on Facebook Live is free to submit questions by typing them into the comments below the live broadcast. Again, we'll get to as many as we can this evening. And lastly, the panelists are not here to judge or to criticize past decisions or talk about what should or should not have been done. This conversation is all about future growth. These panelists are sharing their time and expertise to educate and inform so that we can all gain a better understanding about the challenges, options, and opinions on this issue. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. When you get close to time, I'll give a little wave. If you blow right past 2 minutes, I'll stand up awkwardly, and then we'll move on to the next panelist. If you won't listen to me, Ashley's coming up, and then it's over. All right, the first question of the evening. Oh, introduction. I did introduce. Let them speak. Thank you. Our first introduction. We'll start with Mr. Christian.
Great. Can everybody hear me all right? Great. Well, as my name tag suggests, my name is Lynch Christian. I'm here on behalf of the Eastern Panhandle Home Builders Association. I've been in Berkeley County since 2015. I'm a resident here. I came by ways of Virginia, Lynchburg specifically, and then Charlottesville. I'm a private real estate developer here in the Eastern Panhandle. I focus predominantly on master plan subdivisions, typically of 200 to 300 units or more. Also mixed use development, including some light commercial. And I have a real passion for the home building industry, the construction industry, land management, land development practice, as well as, all sorts of different land use planning. So thank you all for coming out tonight. Appreciate it. Looking forward to having a really good discussion.
Great. Mr. Gochenour.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Eddie Gochenour. I'm with the Berkeley County Council, and I'm born and raised here. My family's been here multiple generations. So, I've seen a lot of changes as well as you have. I've spent my entire adult life in fire and EMS and emergency services. I've spent 32 and a half years with the city of Martinsburg. I spent 10 years with Berkeley County as their emergency manager and as the county fire chief. So I know the stress and strains that our growth has put on those services firsthand. And when you look at the whole picture, you want to be able to try and find that balance. And it's a challenge. It's every day to be able to find that balance to where we're balancing our infrastructure, we're balancing the needs of the community, and just the quality of life. So that's where I'm at today. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ouellet.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to Admiral and Bonnie Stubblefield for inviting us this evening. Appreciate it. And for those of you who may not know, the Admiral was also the director of the Water District, or I should say the chairman of the board of the Water District for many years. So his passion in the water industry is obvious. I don't think I'm going to have anything exciting to say tonight of a passion for land use or anything else. I'm only here because I can share with you the experiences that the Water District has incurred over the recent years due to all the growth and the needs that we have to invest in the necessary infrastructure to set the table, not only for our existing customers, which is our priority, the public health, but also for economic opportunity that may be coming down the road. And we want to be in a position that if that is the desire of the community, we are, like I say, positioned to encourage it and to support it as it comes about. So I have numerous facts and figures, which I'd be glad to share this evening as the conversation is ongoing. And once again, from our perspective, we're not here to advocate one way or the other for anything. We're simply here to share with you what the effects of growth are, what we're doing to try to sustain it and to support the community, and how are we going to pay for it. Because there's a huge investment that we're about to undertake, and it's going to require that rates are adjusted. And how are we going to adjust those rates? And what is the contribution going to be from the building community to support the infrastructure, which is here to support them as they try to provide for themselves and do their practice and their business that they wish to engage in. So hopefully during the course of the evening, we'll be able to share a lot of thoughts as to what we have in front of us so you can all be better informed.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Settle.
Good evening. I thank you for this opportunity to participate in the panel and look forward to this discussion. My name is Clarence Settle. My career, my adult career, I started in the fire service like Eddie. I started as a volunteer firefighter and worked my way up to chief and worked in a combination fire system in Maryland. I also went to work for the federal government as a firefighter and worked my way up as a fire inspector and as a fire protection specialist. Then went into the safety field and ended up being the safety and occupational health manager for Naval District, Washington, the Washington Navy Yard and surrounding metropolitan area. I moved to Martinsburg because my grandchildren live here. My grandson plays football for Musselman here, and my mother lives here. I moved up from Knoxville, Tennessee. I had been working for a DoD contractor, supporting the Navy facility activities with a web-based management system for fire and safety. I moved into a subdivision in Berkeley County in 2014, and I started getting involved in my community and my subdivision. I've attended over 9 meetings with the Planning Commission. I've attended meetings with the County Council in reference to the concerns that I have of the development of the local subdivision community, and look forward to bringing my concerns to the table. And then the overall growth of Berkeley County, as we all know, is just something to marvel, and we need to bring some common sense into development.
Thank you all. Yielded lots of time back to the floor. That's great. Gotta love a good yield. All right. Starting with our questions, and we'll do about 2 minutes for each answer, and you'll each be able to answer if you so choose, share information, etc. So question 1, over the last 20 years, more than 40,000 people have moved into Berkeley County, and we can see why. With the beauty of the area, recreational opportunities, industry growth, lower cost of living, and more. But what do you see as the most pressing infrastructure issue related to this rapid growth? And we can start with Mr. Lynch.
It might be best to start with Eddie. I've only been here 8 years,
Sure.
So maybe if I could catch the tail end.
We're flexible.
Appreciate that. That's good. I don't think that there is one part of our infrastructure that has not struggled with this growth. From our school system to our roads to our water, the sewer is probably the only one today that's in halfway decent shape. I think that they're operating near 50%. But there's a big lift too. I mean, there's over 400 miles of sewer lines in this county that the sewer district maintains. So I don't think that there is one part of our infrastructure. You go back to fire departments, the law enforcement, our EMS. We've just recently had to raise our EMS rates to put additional crews on the road to make sure that folks that when they call for assistance, that they get it in a timely manner. We were really on that edge of failing. So, being able to provide those critical services, is very important to the welfare of our folks. So, I don't think that there's one infrastructure that's not blemished by this.
Do you have one that stands out to you as the most pressing right now?
I would say today, our roads are the most critical. The lack of infrastructure, the lack of investment by the state of West Virginia here. Every opportunity I get, I take advantage of the time. I've even spoke to the Governor Justice very briefly because, he's busy, but yet he did take a minute to listen to me. I told him, Mr. Governor, we need help here. With the growth that we have, we need help with our roads. But other than the Route 9 East, and of course, the investment that they've made here in Inwood, I wouldn't want to take a vote on that today, whether it's, but personally, I like them. But my household's split on. My wife doesn't, I do. But truthfully, they have not invested here in our roadways. And I'm not saying that we need all new roads, because there are things that they could do to our existing roads to make them safer and more efficient, take some humps out, take some curves out, straighten them out a little bit. And, a lot of our roads don't even have shoulders, so I'd say that at the end of the day, highways.
Ouellet?
Well, I can only speak on one variable of the infrastructure, and thank you for the opportunity to do that. To Hans mentioned, I think 40,000 people have moved over the last 20 years. To put that in a little perspective, in the year 2003, the water system had about 14,000 customers, meter connections. We just exceeded 30,000. In the last 4 or 5 years, I've only been in town 4.5 years now, but over the last 4 or 5 years, every year I've looked at how many houses we've added to our water supply, and it continues to be about 1,000 a year. Now, to put that more in a perspective that's understandable, that's 2.7 new metered connections coming to our community every single day of the year. It's a lot of new cars on the road, a lot of new houses, a lot of new opportunities. So it's all good, but just to give you a perspective of the rate of the growth. The problem with that is that everybody demands more and more water, And as we speak,
district, they're not required necessarily to give those to us. We can have conversations with them. You know, in several instances, when we're planning a subdivision, we get a blow-off test at a local hydrant, and that tells us, you know, what the static pressure might be there. And it might determine that it's not strong enough pressure to service a 300 or 400 unit subdivision. So in many cases, you are constrained by what's existing. And hopefully you're working with the water district or the sewer district or with the DOH in the traffic impact study to identify what those improvements are going to be, how, if they're needed, and how you're going to accommodate them through your development.
So that's the perspective. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and just another point to that, when those requirements for a traffic signal or a turn lane are there, the Department of Highways is not paying that bill. The developer pays for those improvements to the roadway. And a lot of people don't realize that, but that's where the money comes from. And I think Mr. Settle has experienced that in the past, the slow response from those.
The first thing I would say is that as a citizen of Berkeley County, the only way we know something's going on a piece of parcel of property is we see one of them little pink signs that's in the mandatory posted under the regulation that they have to post it. But if you ever stop to read the sign, it really don't tell you too much. It tells you a bunch of this is phase 8 of this and plot.
Concern about whether people are aware of what's happening in their subdivision or not. You should have the opportunity to go before the planning commission or before the county council and ask questions as to whether this improvement is being removed from your subdivision.
Yeah, one thing to add on to there, Lynch, is that the amenities that may be proposed by that developer are not bonded. So they may come in with a conceptual design of a pool or a clubhouse or tennis courts, something of that nature. Those amenities are not bonded. And currently, within this past week, I've had conversation with our staff about that. You know, if I come out and I lay out this conceptual design and I sell you this piece of property, you're going to expect to see that somewhere in the future as this development gets built out. And it concerns me that sometimes I feel as if the folks have an opportunity to be misled. And I don't think it's intentional. I don't believe that, but I do believe that their plan at the beginning changes for whatever reason. But those amenities, I would really like to have a good conversation of whether they should be bonded.
Gentlemen, anything to add?
The only thing I'd like to add is that as a citizen, I would like to be notified when bonds are going to be released from your subdivision. We're not notified unless the only way, what I was told, the only way you can find out when the bonds are being released is to look at the county council schedule every week to see if it's coming up. I think it's something that the citizens should be aware of. These bonds are being released and we don't have any more coverage under that bond.
We'll have to get someone to intimate with the process and the state code surrounding all that for in a future talk. So moving on now to some questions from you, the audience. Could increased water demands have any effect on those with wells?
the majority of our water does come from the Potomac River, so that wouldn't affect the groundwater. However, in the south end of the county, we do have a spring that we depend on for a considerable amount of water. And we're investigating other opportunities in the area down here in the south end of the county for groundwater supplies. Will it affect a well? I don't know. That would be determined through a hydrogeological study that would be performed when we actually develop the water supply. And it could conceivably because underground there is connections, but that would be something that would be part of the process to determine because they monitor individual wells while we do yield tests from a proposed public well. So yes, it can be. Will it be? Would be determined during the process.
And just a follow-up there. Many of you may or you may not know, but I think that's something that hamstrung our water district years ago. And obviously Jim's the expert on the water district, but from a layman's point of view, prior to Patrick Morsi, our Attorney General, our water restriction, we had a water restriction of what we could take from the Potomac River because Maryland said you cannot take only a certain amount of gallons. Patrick Morsi challenged them and they said, you're right. We don't own the water. We regulate the water, but we don't own the water. So cost. So I've tried to find that level ground.
But I think you have to look at your overall infrastructure too and make dynamic decisions on how big you're going to let a community develop with the infrastructure that we have. Somebody needs to really take a hard look at the growth in the county and say, do we need to slow it up some until the state can come in and do something with our roads, till the water company can build a $90 million water supply unit. But we just continue to give permits and the growth continues to grow and it's outpacing our infrastructure.
So if you peel away a lot of things and say, why are we growing? It's for one reason and one reason only, and that's Route 81. It's all about logistics. And on a kind of a side note, one of the worst things that we could do is continue to build houses along areas along Route 81 that could be more desirable for more beneficial use. So we don't have zoning. So this area has never been cut out as an area that should be set aside because it's the most valuable real estate in the state of West Virginia. It's along Route 81. And if we allow it to be covered in houses along that corridor, the consequences down the road for people living here are going to be reduced. So somehow we have to figure out how to get that right before the last pieces of land. And Lynch would know more about this than anyone, how that can work. But it's an opportunity that's going away if we don't do something about it as a community.
And to pull back quickly on the question, because I think that point sort of came up in your answer, Mr. Settle. Could it stall industrial, commercial, residential growth to have, like what Mr. Gochenour was talking about, or to stall and halt growth? What happens to developers if all of a sudden you had to recoup that cost of the fourth home on the acre? Can you give us the developer's perspective on how that works?
Yeah, I mean, at least in Mr. Gochenour's example of decreasing density, that raises cost, and those costs are passed right from the developer to the end consumer. There's no room for developers to eat costs, much like in any business that you run. Those costs get passed to the end consumer. So the cost of housing goes up. There are fewer people who are able to afford to buy. And probably there are more rental communities or perhaps multifamily communities that develop because of that. As far as the demographics that we're fostering here in the Panhandle, I think we're all trying to figure that out and trying to figure out that balance. As Hans said in his introduction, we're the one part of the state that is having positive net migration. And, why is it that we're getting this positive net migration? A lot of people believe it is strictly because of I-81 and the growth in industry that we've had here. But we have a lot of retirees who also choose to move out of Northern Virginia or out of DC or Maryland for a more affordable and in some people's opinion, a better quality of life out here in the Eastern Panhandle. And so it's going to be difficult to answer that question moving forward as developers and developing our projects so that we have a mixed use component of different types of houses at different price points, suiting different people's needs.
Yeah, and I think, to add to that is going to be the folks that work from home. that they're, maybe perhaps they work in Baltimore or DC, but now they don't have to go there every day. They can work from home because we've got decent, depending upon where you live, broadband. So those folks they're going to move here. I mean, we know it's nice, so.
And that's interesting, what Eddie just brought up about COVID and the impacts of work from home. Certainly, we had a lot of people move out here in 2020 and 2021, now that they could work from home. A lot of them bought houses out here at incredibly low interest rates, and they might not be incentivized to sell those again to a new resident of Berkeley County, but instead to hold on to them and rent them, which it makes it incredibly difficult for developers to forecast what the demographics, wants, and needs are going to be over the course of a project that might last 10 or 15 years, depending on market cycle. And that's the kind of questions we're trying to solve at the very start of a development. We're trying to look 10 and 15 years out to what the wants of our consumers will be and what the needs of the county will be. And it's just incredibly difficult. It's a very complex question.
This next question dovetails well with that, because at the start of a development, when land is first being developed, is there money set aside for additional highways, hospitals, schools, fire, police, water, sewer, or is that paid for through taxes of current residents? And let's see, sorry, I'm reading in between the lines here. Is there land set aside for green space? Are there those sorts of requirements when land is first being developed?
I'll start with green space. Green space has kind of a linear relationship to density or impervious area. So if you develop a certain amount of impervious area, that's rooftops, driveways, roads, sidewalk, you have a certain amount of green space. That's required by our subdivision ordinance. As far as water, sewer, those two both have capital improvement fees. So not at the time that the developer proposes the project, but at the time the building permit is applied for, the builder makes a contribution to the water and sewer district that's put into a separate account, as I understand, and used to help pay some of those growth-related expenses. Schools here in the Panhandle are funded predominantly through the school bond or the school levy. And as far as I know, we don't make any contributions to schools other than at the onset, we submit to them a form that says this is how many homes we're building, this is how many students we anticipate we're going to bring to the table, and they incorporate that in their capital improvement plan, which is what they base their levies on. So everyone in the Panhandle is paying through their property taxes for school improvements. That includes the people who are moving into the Panhandle, and it's all of the methodology surrounding what part of growth does growth pay for. There's, and Jim can tell you this, there's engineering firms out there that are just doing the financial engineering on how growth pays for growth. And there's methodologies that are evolving all the time and changing all the time. And it requires just a constant finger on the pulse from all of our public utilities, our school system, our county council, the DOH, on how best to pay for that. And speaking to the DOH really quickly, which I think I left off, yes, when we go through the traffic impact study portion, the traffic impact study looks at specific intersections. It grades them on whether they're acceptable or whether they're failing. And if they're failing and the DOH requests improvement from a developer for offsite intersections, the developer normally makes a cash contribution to the DOH, and it's the DOH's responsibility to use that cash when they're ready to include that project in their capital improvement plan to complete that capital improvement. And that's probably piggybacking off of what Mr. Settle said earlier. Again, that takes the timing of the delivery of all these things out of the developer's hand and out of the county's hand and puts it in the DOH's hand. So some of these projects that many developers have contributed cash for already have not begun. But yes, the developer has paid in for that improvement.
You may not have it off the top of your head, but just a clarification, when you say that there are contributions made, is there a formula based on the cost that you have to contribute a certain amount, or is it at your discretion?
No, there's a cost estimate provided by the DOH. And that occurs before they will approve your traffic impact study. So your traffic impact study is required when you have a large subdivision, say 100 lots or more. Sometimes when your subdivisions are small, they don't require traffic impact studies, but a larger development who is going through the traffic impact study will be required to count new homes contributing to those intersections in their counts because they get current traffic counts. The actual traffic consultant goes out, they set up the strips, and they do traffic counts during the school year, which is the key part. They don't do these studies when it's not the school year. And the DOH sets that contribution amount. You can put it up as cash typically, or a bond in many other cases, and they hold on to it until they're ready to move forward with that capital improvement.
Okay.
To answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Just wanted to make sure when you say contribution, is it like, here's $20, or is it like there's a set amount based on the cost?
And just one more thing. One of the difficult things about that for a developer is, I believe the DOH, when they pursue traffic projects, pays Davis-Bacon, and they're required to pay higher wages to complete a project than a private developer might sometimes be required to do. And there's no ability, there's no option for the private developer to enter into a public-private partnership with the DOH to construct that improvement on the front end of the project, just so people know that that's not an option for us.
And so again, the question in the
That's how I feel. I mean, today, if you ride down Route 11, you see these huge warehouses sitting in a residential neighborhood. That's not the right place for that. They need to be closer to the 81 corridor or over near the airport. Hopefully one day that airport is going to, take off and do good things. That's the largest airport in the state. West Virginia.
homeowners' wells are negatively affected or made unusable due to overdevelopment, what recourse would they have? Is it a legal question? Is there something in the ordinance?
I don't think there's anything in the ordinance to address that. I honestly don't know.
Anyone else?
I think that would be a legal question. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar.
Let's get a lawyer on the panel next time. This is a question specifically for councilperson Gochenour. How many larger subdivisions have been denied in the county in recent years? You probably don't have a number off the top of your head, but have there been project proposals that have been denied in recent years?
In its entirety?
It just says denied, so we can infer or maybe you can talk about the nuance.
Honestly, I'm not aware of any large development that's been denied, large or small, that has been denied. There have been obviously perhaps quite problems with engineering or something of that nature that had to be straightened out before it moved forward. But I'm not aware of anybody that's been totally denied.
No one else have experience with that?
I think the administration at the planning commission works very well with the developers. I've served on the developers roundtable since 2016 as just a citizen on that council, and get an opportunity to sit down and listen to this county engineer talking to the developers and so forth. So I think, they've been over backwards to make the process work. I have, some concerns about we don't have enough regulations to cover what we need to cover for the community, but they work well with the developers.
Well, this question actually poses that question. Why are development permits allowed without improving roads or other infrastructure? And why aren't there more emphasis, or why aren't there more ways to provide recreational space like parks and trails? But I guess the meat of that question, and maybe the question isn't even why but are they given without potential increases, improvements to roads or the necessary infrastructure put in place?
Well, I don't know whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, but we don't have any authority over highways whatsoever. I mean, our engineer can actually request perhaps a deceleration lane, going into a subdivision. But if the traffic study that's done does not warrant it by the Department of Highways regulations, then they say it's not required. They don't want it in their right of way. So they don't want to maintain it. So even though a lot of times our engineer, I honestly believe he's trying to look down the road, further down the road in the future. But as the regulations stand today, the Department of Highways controls every inch of highway in this county. We can request, and I do. I mean, I'm not bashful when it comes to highway safety. And I've explained to them, look, there are a few new roads we need here, but a lot of our roads could just be improved to take some of the humps. And, and the gentleman told me, he said, well, that limestone's awful hard over that way. I'm like, look, I could believe that back in the 20s or 30s, but not today. I don't want to hear that. So why we cannot get the investments here, I do not know.
What about the other infrastructure in your experiences? Is there?
Well, I think, if you've been listening to us talk here tonight, we've kind of addressed a lot of these items with how we are trying to have growth pay for growth. And there are methodologies such as the capacity improvement fees. I misspoke earlier when I said capital improvement fees. They're capacity improvement fees that the Water and Sewer District collects, or the monies that the West Virginia DOH collects. Sometimes it's a question of timing, and people feel like these improvements haven't been made yet, so that there's no money set aside for these types of things. And certainly as time passes, the amount of those contributions become less and less valuable. So it is on us to continue pushing to see those improvements made. But developers are trying to set aside money, and certainly our districts are trying to charge fees so that growth does pay for growth in some capacity.
The next question, I'm going to sort of take these two questions. I think they relate a lot, and Jim, you'll be critical to some of the technical details on this. Is there a state requirement for counties to periodically update water and sewer master plans? Do they have to do that every so often?
I don't know if it's a requirement. We choose to do it, and we actually just completed one a week or so ago in the draft form. That's why we have a new number as to how much infrastructure we need for just the distribution system. So we're always trying to look out as to where we have deficiencies, and we put together a map showing all of the inventoried proposed subdivisions. And then we try to say, okay, how are we going to be able to serve these in the future based upon the anticipated water demand, and then design our infrastructure accordingly. So as a rule, any good organization is always looking out and planning ahead, so that when an opportunity comes along, as Lynch mentioned earlier, he may be building a subdivision and there may be an opportunity to improve water flows in another area. So we take that opportunity to enhance it, because we know there's a value down the road by saving money today, by doing it efficiently, to then be in a position to serve it in the future. So nothing regulated that I'm aware of, and sewer may be different, maybe they do, but we just do it as a proactive measure to stay in front of the needed infrastructure.
And really quickly on that, are they looking at water availability decades down the road, 20, 30, 40 years when they do these studies, or is it short term?
Oh, no, we look. We've already got projected plans of how much water we're going to need. That's why we are in the process of expanding the river plant from 6 million gallons a day to 10 million gallons a day, which is a significant increase in capacity. The Bunker Hill water treatment plant down here in Inwood, Bunker Hill, it's very old. It had to be replaced anyway due to its obsolescence. But while we're doing that, we're going to expand the capacity from about 2.5 million gallons a day to 6 million gallons a day. Now, we don't have 6 million gallons a day of water, but that's why we're searching the area down here to try to find out more water we can bring to the plant treat it, and then have it available if demand desires it in the future.
Is that the $90 million project you spoke to earlier?
Well, it's one. The Bunker Hill plant itself is now $65 million. The expansion of the river plant from 6 million gallons to 10 million gallons is $32 million. And then we just got that report the other day that said we have $190 million worth of infrastructure for distribution system that also could be spent in the next 10 years. So once again, we're planning ahead. We're not in a position to promote or deny growth, but we're simply trying to be in a position so that if this community wants it, we're there to support it.
I apologize, Mr. Christian. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Jim did a great job addressing water and sewer. The DOH is required to update their capital improvement plan. I think the federal regulation requires them to have at least a 20-year outlook plan. On their website, I know you can find at least a 20-year. I believe they have a 50-year, and they have a 5-year that I believe is revised every single 5 years. All of that information is available to the public and available for public comment on the West Virginia DOH's website. And if you're really interested in roads, a great resource is the Hagerstown Eastern Panhandle Metropolitan Planning Organization. They have a great executive director, Matt Mullinax, who does a great job sifting through all that information that comes out of Charleston and highlighting the projects that are important up here in the Eastern Panhandle. That's a great place to start with finding out what road improvement projects are slated, when they might happen, and certainly educating yourself more about how they're financed, because that, I think it's called the STIB plan, the State Transportation Improvement Plan, where the state has to figure out how they're going to finance the debt service on all the road improvements they make. So that comes to calculating the fuel tax per gallon, tolls in other parts of the state. I know we don't have them on I-81, but they've certainly been talked about. And the cost of getting your vehicle registered, I think, is the other big part of the revenues that the state gets for DOH, your registration, number of registered vehicles in the state, et cetera.
The gas tax.
Yes, the gas tax, yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for that. And Mr. Mullinax is the background here in Berkeley County. Worked for some time, I think, GIS for the county commission. So he's a wealth of information about the Eastern Panhandle.
A wealth of information.
We talked a little bit about the Potomac River right in the beginning, and we are now able to take as much water as we can drink, which is a lot. But are we working collaboratively with Maryland, Virginia, and DC about how we use that water, or how much we take, or is it a free-for-all right now? I'm wondering how much talk.
Well, I think there's an ample supply in the river, so it's not an issue of quantity.
Bless you.
Yeah, that's, I mentioned it earlier, the one starts with the water supply. If you can't create what doesn't exist, and the one thing we have is water.
Yeah.
We can build plants, pipes, and pumps, so that variable is kind of in place. So there's not an issue with quantity in the Potomac River. We do focus on quality in the river, and we have a collaborative effort with water supplies all the way from Washington, D.C. up into Maryland as far as what we can do to try to ensure that the runoff is minimized so the quality's as good as can possibly be. But it's a huge watershed area, and it's very difficult to manage such a variable. But there is something in play. How much value it has, I don't really know.
You mentioned water quality. One of our questions this evening, is anyone looking at air pollution along Interstate 81 and the detrimental health effects that has on residents, and talking about the idea of growth potentially increasing that problem? Is that something that's taken into consideration, whether planning a development or considering approval?
On the subdivision side, I can say that that's not taken into account. There's no specific application that's being made for air quality. When these larger companies that have manufacturing plants come in, they do have to get an air quality permit if they're going to create exhaust. And I do know that Region 9, which either has an office still or resides in 400 West Stephen, they do have some air quality studies on their website available, I think, out looking for Berkeley County if you're interested in that. So somebody is looking into that.
Yeah, it's DEP is who does those. And they do have, I don't know about on the 81 corridor, but I do know that they have some throughout the county.
There's piles of questions, but plenty of opportunity in the future, I think, to come together again and continue the conversation. I know 90 minutes goes fast, especially in 2 to 3 minute increments. I very much appreciate all of your insights and all of your questions and participation, both here and at home. But I'd like to take just a couple of moments and give you each, as we started, just a quick opportunity to either reflect on the evening or tell folks a resource that you'd like them to check out as they continue to explore the topic.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having us. Thank you guys for attending. Improving our processes here in Berkeley County really begin with this type of collaborative thinking and public interest. As far as resources go, I would say, Hagerstown Eastern Panhandle Metropolitan Planning Organization, Region 9, the Berkeley County Planning and Engineering Department, which can be accessed through the County Council's website, are all great places to start if you're wanting to find out what to look for and how to keep yourself up to date with what kind of development projects are coming through Berkeley County. I know that Planning Commission meetings are typically the first and third Monday of every month. Their agendas are posted online, I believe, up to a week before the meeting. The read-aheads are posted a little bit closer to the meeting time, which provide you the more detailed information. So be sure to check those out if you want to stay up to date. And obviously, the County Council is maintaining a Facebook page that's passing out a lot of that information. So again, thanks for having us. We really appreciate it.
Gochenour?
Yes, thanks for being here this evening. I wasn't sure exactly what to expect. You never know in a public forum, but I really appreciate your attentive. I look around, as I was talking, everybody's paying attention. So, because I know that this is very important to you, because it's important to us also. But on a county level, just so you also know that the farmland protection receives, when a sale of a transaction occurs, farmland protection receives monies out of that, what we used to call dock stamps. Okay, so currently in Berkeley County alone, there's 7,900 acres that's currently under the easement that's protected forever. 7,900 acres, and there's more. As more monies come in, they have this grading system that will allow the different farms or orchards to be placed into this easement to protect it in the future. So those are really good things. Plus, you can put them in through a preservation trust as well on your own. But through the farmland, you actually do get paid. They base it on, okay, we got roads, we got water, we got sewer, we got these things, and they figure out what those dollar amounts are. So, but the 7,900 acres there, I think, is important. That's currently in farmland protection. Truthfully, we're all in this together. We are, and I didn't know exactly like the format would be, but I'm always open to suggestions. Please call me, email me, stop me at the gas station, wherever. I don't care. If you have something that can help this county or help us have a better quality of life, please reach out to me and share it, and we'll run it up the flagpole, see where it goes. All right.
Mr. Ouellet?
I can't top that. Pretty good. I guess one of the, we're having a conversation on growth. I guess kind of Eddie suggested earlier, there's parts of the state which wish they had our problems. So there's a plus and a minus to everything in life, and it's a great community. And I guess that's why one of the reasons people are coming here. From the perspective of the water district, you'll be hearing a lot more from us, since we have to invest all of this funds in order to sustain the needs of the community. So we'll be out and about talking a lot more in the next year, as we have to go through that process of finding out the sources of financing to pay for all this. So that's what our challenge is. We got so much to do, and once I didn't have a chance to evaluate or kind of elaborate on all the things we got going on, but there's so much if we're going to sustain this growth and actually just promote the public health and safety, which is our objective as we wake up every day. So thanks for all your support, and you can always contact us at the office if you ever have any questions.
Thank you. And Mr. Settle?
And I think that the advancement of Berkeley County is always going to be under a struggle, because the County Planning Commission and the County Council only controls so much. So when you're at the mercy of the state for major infrastructure improvements to improve these obligations, they don't really have any control over the state. The water department works good with us, the sewer department works good with us, but we all know we've got the rain tax now on our water bill, and then we have the Chesapeake Bay, save the Chesapeake Bay added to our water bills, and our water bills, with this improvements he's talking about, we're all going to pay for it with our bills. But it's going to be, it takes a lot of coordination, but we need public input, and public needs to be talking to the council and needs to be talking to the planning commission. I go to these meetings. I'm the only person on the developers roundtable that's just a civilian. And I go to the meetings quarterly when they have them. And I go to the planning, planning commission meetings every time they stick one of them little pink signs outside of my driveway or outside of the road the subdivision I live on. Because that's the only way I have any input into what's going on in our community. Because I'm under an HOA that's controlled by the developer. I have no say and get no feedback except for send your HOA money in. The only way I get any feedback or anything in my community to find out about it is I go to the planning commission. And Eddie's seen me at the planning commission when I bring up the points that I bring up in reference to my community. But it takes community involvement. If I'm the only crazy guy down there talking about it, it's really easy for them to blow you off. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate greatly having an opportunity created like this by the Stubblefield Institute. It's a wonderful resource for our community and for the continued civil discussion of this and other important topics. We are a community first and foremost, and we can solve these problems together. I'm very grateful for my opportunity to come and see some familiar faces and be able to talk again. I don't get to do it as much as I used to, and my wife has told me numerous times to please stop. So, but everybody, please have a safe trip home. Before you leave, I want to turn things back over to Executive Director of the Stubblefield Institute, Ms. Ashley Hurst.
Thank you, and I'll say a final thank you to everyone who participated tonight. Whether you're here as a panelist, Hans is our moderator, our community engagement committee who put this event together, and of course all of our attendees. We would not be here to answer your questions if you weren't here to pose them. And in doing that, I want to remind you to please fill out the post-event survey. You can scan the QR code with the camera on your phone on the back of the program, and it will take you directly to the survey. That is your opportunity to tell us if you enjoyed this program, future topics you would like to see. And if you enjoyed tonight's program, please like us on Facebook so you can find out about more of our events. And also you can join our mailing list through that QR code and we'll send that information directly to you. So once again, thank you for joining us. Have a nice rest of your evening and we hope to see you again soon.
I wasn't sure. That was great. On our way out here. That was pretty cool. I appreciate it. Sorry for the scare. It's okay.
Hopefully, that's okay. That's okay. Yes.
Good start.